Edward stepped off the plane and paused for a second, pulling in a deep breath. After 4 years, he was finally back. Home. The air wrapped around him, instantly warm, thick, and heavy with smells he didn't even realize he had missed. The city had a scent of its own. Evening food cooking somewhere close. Roasted corn. Exhaust in the air. That dry, familiar dust you only find here in this part of the world. For 4 years, he had lived on cold, clean air in a distant country. Somehow, he had forgotten how alive this place made him feel. He stood at the top of the steps, closed his eyes for a moment. Just one moment. Because the truth was, he hadn't left as the same man who had just returned. Time had changed him, not just on the outside, something deeper. He carried a weight now, one that had nothing to do with his body. Long nights, double shifts, empty dinners, a quiet house across the world where his wife slept alone, waiting. He had spent birthdays staring at a screen, anniversaries reduced to a video call, watching her smile through a small glowing box while miles stretched endlessly between them. But now it was over. He was here. He was home. He had imagined this moment again and again, lying awake at night in his big bed, in that big house far away, replaying every detail like a scene he had practiced too many times. He would arrive quietly, no warning. He had told Abigail he needed 1 more year. That part was a lie. He wanted to see her face. The exact second everything changed. The surprise, the disbelief, the joy. He pictured her opening the door, finding him standing there with his bags, his tired eyes, and everything he had held inside for years finally ready to come out. I'm home. I kept my promise. We made it. He had believed in that moment completely, like it was waiting just ahead, perfectly wrapped, ready for him. As he walked through arrivals, his phone lit up nonstop. Missed calls, messages, notifications piling up all at once. A life he had only been half present in. He barely looked at them, switched the ringer off. Abigail didn't know he was back, and he wanted it to stay that way just a little longer. The driver waiting for him was Samuel, an older man who had known both him and Abigail long before he ever left. Quiet face, sharp eyes, the kind that noticed everything. As they drove out into the evening traffic, Samuel kept glancing at him through the mirror. "Sir," he finally said, careful with his words, "are you sure you don't want me to call your wife? Just to let her know you're coming?" Edward smiled slightly and shook his head. "No, it's a surprise." Samuel held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and said nothing else. Edward turned toward the window. The city moved past him like something unreal. Streetlights flickering on. Small kiosks selling drinks and phone credit. Hawkers walking between cars with trays balanced on their heads. Children in uniforms laughing as they made their way home. A woman at the roadside frying food, smoke rising into the orange sky. He had missed this, more than he ever admitted. He reached out and touched the window lightly. 4 years ago, he had taken this same kind of ride, but in the opposite direction, heading to the airport, leaving everything behind, chasing a future he believed he was building for them. He never looked back. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself it would be worth it. Was it? His mind went to the house. The cream-colored duplex he had paid for piece by piece, with sleepless nights, overtime, every dollar sent back home without fail. Then Abigail, her soft, round face, calm eyes, the way she stood at the door the morning he left, wearing that blue dress, her stomach full with their child, trying to smile even when it was hard. "Come back to us," she had whispered. "I promise," he had said, and now he was here to keep it. His hand moved into his jacket pocket, touching the small velvet box inside. He had bought it 3 weeks ago, the moment he decided to come home early. A gold bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a house. He remembered standing in the shop, turning it in his hands. "Someone special?" the woman had asked. "My wife," he had said. Even saying it had made his chest feel warm. The car turned onto his street, and then the house came into view. The gate, the compound, the cream-colored duplex standing tall behind it, exactly the way he had imagined. Real, solid, not just pictures on a phone anymore. Everything he worked for was right there. He noticed a new security light near the balcony. He didn't remember approving that, but it was fine. Good, even. It meant someone had been taking care of things. He sat up slightly. Almost there. Samuel slowed at the gate and looked at him again. Edward grabbed his bags, eyes fixed on the house. He thought about the door, about her face. What he didn't know, not even a small hint, was that what waited inside wasn't the moment he had imagined for months. It was something else, something that would change everything. He paid Samuel, added extra, and stepped out. The night settled around him. Quiet, just crickets in the distance, and the steady hum of a generator somewhere nearby. The kind of street that sleeps early. He stood at the gate, taking it all in. Black iron. Tall. Strong. The exact one he had picked from a catalog at 11 o'clock at night, zooming in on pictures while asking Abigail what she thought. She had laughed, said any gate was fine. He had spent 20 more minutes choosing this one. And now, here it was. He pushed it open slowly. No sound. Recently oiled. Another good sign. Everything looked right. He stepped inside and closed it behind him. The yard was neat. The small garden trimmed. A new potted plant near the steps, healthy green. Abigail must have bought it. She always wanted more plants. He had told her they could do that later. Seems like she didn't wait. He smiled faintly, walking toward the door, his shoes quiet against the ground, both hands holding his bags. Then the security light snapped on above, bright, sudden, and that's when he saw it. A car, parked to the side, half hidden in shadow, dark-colored, clean, fairly new, engine off, windows up. Edward stopped. He didn't recognize it. His thoughts slowed. Careful, measured. Abigail had a small red car. He paid for it in his second year away. But this wasn't that. This was bigger, darker. A man's car. Something shifted in the back of his mind. He pushed it away. Immediately. A visitor. That's all. For years away, of course she has visitors. That's normal. He kept walking. The lights inside were on. The sitting room glowing softly through the curtains, the same cream curtains she had bought when they first moved in. She had ironed them herself, stood back, proud. Good. She's home. He placed one bag down, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his key. The same key he had carried for 4 years. The one she pressed into his hand at the airport. So you don't forget where home is. He never did. He slid it into the lock, and then he heard it. Laughter. Not Abigail's. He knew her laugh too well to mistake it. This was different. More than one voice. Low. Easy. Comfortable. The kind of laughter people share when they feel completely at home with each other. People who weren't expecting anyone to walk in. Edward froze, his hand still on the key. 1 second. 2. 3. The voices continued inside. Relaxed. Unbothered. He told himself there had to be a simple reason. A friend. A neighbor. Maybe someone from church. Maybe family. That's normal. You've been gone 4 years. Life didn't pause. He turned the key. The door clicked open. He pushed it slowly. The room was warm. Bright. The TV was on, playing something loud, but ignored. 2 glasses sat on the table. Drinks inside. Half full. A plate of small chops beside them. Set out carefully. On purpose. For someone important. He saw all of it in 1 second. And then, he saw them. Abigail sat at the far end of the sofa, turned slightly, her head tilted back, laughing at something just said. She wore a yellow dress he had never seen before. Her hair was styled perfectly, and even in that first sharp second, Edward noticed something that hit him harder than he expected. She looked calm, too calm, relaxed in a way he hadn't seen in years. And sitting right next to her, too close. Not normal close. Not polite close. But the kind of close that only happens when boundaries have already been crossed without hesitation, was Kelvin. His cousin Kelvin. The same Kelvin who called him just 2 days ago asking how his trip back home was going. The same Kelvin who said, "Don't worry, everything is fine here. I'm watching things for you." The same Kelvin who stood at Edward's wedding, looked him in the eyes, and called him brother, family, best friend in front of everyone. That same Kelvin was now sitting in Edward's living room, in Edward's house, eating from Edward's plate, laughing with Edward's wife like he belonged there. And in that exact moment, something cold dropped deep into Edward's chest. Something final. Neither of them had noticed him yet. Edward stood in the doorway, bag still in his hand, key still warm from the lock, and the small velvet box still inside his jacket pocket. And he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched. Kelvin was the first to sense something was wrong. It wasn't clear what he noticed, maybe a shadow, maybe a shift in the air, but his laugh broke mid-sound. Just stopped. His face changed instantly. The easy smile disappeared. His shoulders tightened. His eyes locked on Edward standing in the doorway. And for a long, unbearable moment, they just stared at each other. Then Abigail turned. She followed Kelvin's gaze. The sound she made wasn't a scream, not even a full word, just a sharp breath, like someone who reached into the dark and touched something they weren't ready for. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened. Edward. His name fell out of her mouth like it didn't belong there anymore. Edward had dreamed of hearing that word again for 4 years. He had imagined it so many times, her voice filled with relief, joy, love, running toward him like nothing else mattered. This was not that. This was panic. Caught. Exposed. Edward finally stepped inside. Slow. Controlled. He placed his bag down by the door, like he needed both hands free for what was coming. Then he straightened and looked at both of them. Kelvin. Abigail. The table. The glasses. The half-eaten food. The TV still playing in the background while nobody cared anymore. He said nothing, and that silence felt louder than anything that had ever happened in that room. Kelvin broke first. He stood up too fast, like someone trying to escape a place without running. His hands lifted in front of him immediately. Edward, brother, he started quickly. We didn't know you were coming back today. Nobody told us. Edward didn't blink. I know, he said. Just that. Calm. Flat. Controlled. Kelvin opened his mouth again, then stopped. Nothing came out. Abigail hadn't moved. She was still on the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap. Fingers twisted together like she was holding herself together by force. Her eyes stayed on Edward, but not steady, not strong. Something was breaking behind them. Not just guilt, something deeper, like someone who had been hiding a truth for too long and just got caught standing in it. Edward, she said again. This time her voice was steadier, but her hands gave her away. You should have told me you were coming. I would have, he replied. A pause. You would have what? She asked quickly. Then she stopped, because he wasn't shouting. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there in his own home, like a stranger who had walked into the wrong life. His eyes moved slowly across everything. Her face, the yellow dress, the table set, the comfort, the ease, the closeness between them when he walked in. Then his voice came out low. How long? Edward, please, she said. Abigail. The way he said her name wasn't loud, but it was heavy, final. How long? The room went completely still. Kelvin looked down. Abigail didn't, but her eyes couldn't hold steady anymore. She knew, and Edward knew she knew. Everything in that moment told him the truth before she even spoke it. He had flown across an ocean for this homecoming, worked years, built everything, trusted everything, and now he was standing in the middle of it, realizing something had already changed long before he arrived. He pulled his jacket tighter and waited. 8 months after you left, Abigail said quietly. The words didn't feel real at first. Edward stood frozen. 8 months. His mind repeated it automatically, like it was trying to verify a number that didn't make sense. 8 months after he left, he remembered working late nights, calling home on breaks, hearing her say everything was fine, believing it. He swallowed hard. 8 months, he repeated, not a question, just disbelief. Abigail stood up slowly. Her eyes were wet now, but she still wasn't crying fully. Not yet, like something inside her was holding back. I need you to understand, she said. Edward looked at Kelvin. Kelvin didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there like a man waiting for judgment. Sit down, Edward said quietly. Kelvin sat immediately, not because of force, because of silence, because Edward's calm was more dangerous than anger. Edward turned back to Abigail. You said 8 months, he said. Was that when it started or when it became this? He gestured slightly at the table. The glasses, the food, the comfort. Abigail closed her eyes for a second. It started slowly, she said. He came around to check the house like you asked. I was struggling. The baby was small. I was tired all the time. I was lonely, Edward. And every time we talked, it was always work, money, building. I just needed. I called you every day, Edward interrupted. I know. Every day for 4 years. I know, she said again, voice breaking slightly. But a phone call doesn't hold you at 2 a.m. when the baby won't stop crying, she said. It doesn't sit with you at dinner when the house feels empty. Silence again. Edward didn't argue, because part of him understood, and that made it worse. He had been gone, truly gone, even if he had never meant to be. He looked at Kelvin again. This time Kelvin didn't look away, but there was no confidence in his eyes anymore. No excuses, no smooth talk, just exhaustion, and regret that had arrived too late. Brother, Kelvin started quietly. Don't, Edward said. One word. Enough. Kelvin stopped immediately. The TV was still on. Some cheerful sound kept playing in the background, like it didn't belong in the same world anymore. Edward walked over and turned it off. Instant silence. Heavy silence. He stood there for a moment. Then he walked past them both into the kitchen. He needed air. He needed space. Just a few seconds where they didn't exist in the same frame as him. He turned on the tap, drank water slowly. Then again. The kitchen was clean. Too clean. His things were still there. Pots, fixtures, everything he paid for. Everything he built. Even a child's drawing on the fridge. A house. A woman. A small child. No father. No husband. Just a missing space where he should have been. Edward stared at it for a long time. Then he set the glass down, straightened his back, and walked back out. They were still there. Abigail stood near the sofa with her arms folded tight across her chest. Not angry, not defiant, but holding herself together like she was scared she might break apart if she let go. Kelvin was still seated, elbows on his knees, head lowered, his eyes fixed on the floor like it had all the answers he didn't want to say out loud. Edward walked back into the room and stopped near the door again. Same place, same position. He didn't sit. He wasn't staying comfortable here. Not anymore. Something inside him already knew this was not a moment you settle into. It was a moment you pass through or don't pass through at all. His eyes locked on Kelvin first. I want you to tell me something, Edward said calmly. And don't give me a clean version. I want the truth, the real one. Kelvin slowly looked up. Did you come here because you cared about her? Edward asked. Or did you come here because you wanted what was mine? The question dropped heavy into the room. Kelvin opened his mouth, then closed it, then looked away. That small movement said everything. No excuses, no defense, no truth. He was willing to stand behind while looking Edward in the eye, and Edward saw it clearly. A man who truly had no guilt would have answered. Even if it hurt, even if it broke him, he would have answered. But Kelvin looked away. Edward nodded slowly, like something he already suspected had just been confirmed. Then he turned to Abigail. All the money I sent every month, he said. It went to the house, the baby, everything we planned. Something flickered across Abigail's face. Quick, controlled, but not hidden enough. Edward saw it. He always saw it. Abigail, he said again. Most of it, she answered quietly. Edward, most of it. Most. Her lips pressed together. Tight. Kelvin needed help sometimes. He was going through things, and You used my money? Edward cut in. I didn't think of it like that. Tell me how much. Silence. Then she told him. The number wasn't small. Not even close. Edward didn't react right away. He just stood there with it in his head, turning it over slowly. Not just the number, but what it meant. Every extra hour he worked. Every night he stayed late. Every sacrifice. Every missed meal. Every lonely weekend in another country. All of it. And part of it had been handed to Kelvin. Sitting right here, in his house, something cold settled in him. Not rage, not shouting anger. Something deeper, quieter, heavier. The kind of feeling that comes when you finally understand exactly how far something has gone. He slowly looked around the room again. Not just quickly this time. Really looked. New curtain rods he never approved. A shelf on the wall he didn't recognize. Framed photos near the TV. Photos of Kelvin, smiling, standing in this house. His arm around Abigail like he belonged there. Like this was his place too. Edward's voice stayed steady. How often was he here? Abigail didn't answer right away. Abigail. He came often, she said finally. At first once a week, then more. Did he ever sleep here? Silence. 3 seconds. Not long in normal life. But in this room it was enough. It said everything without a single word. Abigail looked down. Edward exhaled slowly through his nose. His face didn't change. His body didn't move. To anyone watching, he would have looked calm. But it wasn't calm like peace. It was calm like something already broken had gone too far to react the normal way anymore. He reached into his jacket pocket, felt the small velvet box, held it for a second, then let go, pulled his hand back out, empty. I see, he said. That was all. Edward, please. Abigail's voice cracked. Please just listen to me. I made a mistake. I know I did. But I love you. I always have. This doesn't mean... Kelvin, Edward said, still not raising his voice. Get your things. Leave my house. Kelvin didn't move immediately. He stayed seated for a moment, like he was still trying to find another version of this situation where he could talk his way out. A better angle. A softer landing. Something familiar that had always been his strength. Words. But not this time. Edward, Kelvin said carefully, I know you're angry. You have every right. But just let me explain. I gave you a chance, Edward replied. Kelvin stopped. You looked away, Edward added. When I asked you. That was your answer. Silence again. Kelvin's expression changed. Just slightly. Like he realized every usual tool he had was useless now. No charm would fix this. No explanation would rebuild it. Edward wasn't bending. Not even slightly. And Kelvin knew it. Slowly, Kelvin stood up. He picked up his phone. His keys. His jacket from the sofa arm. His jacket in Edward's house. He didn't look at either of them. He walked toward the door. Then stopped beside Edward for a second. They stood side by side. Two men who grew up together. Shared meals. Shared memories. Shared moments that used to mean something simple until now. Edward didn't turn. I'm sorry, Kelvin said quietly. And Edward believed him. But it didn't change anything. Because sorry doesn't undo time. It doesn't erase months. It doesn't fix betrayal already lived through. It only shows up when everything else is already gone. Close the gate on your way out, Edward said. Kelvin left. The door opened. Closed. Footsteps outside. A car door. Engine starting. Tires moving. The gate opening, then closing again. Then silence. Complete silence. Abigail broke first. She was crying fully now. Sitting on the sofa, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. No performance. No control. Just reality finally hitting her all at once. Edward didn't move to her. He sat in the armchair across from her instead. The chair he had picked himself. From a catalog. For a future that now felt distant. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking at her. When she lowered her hands, her face was red and wet. Not the woman he had imagined waiting for him. Not the moment he had dreamed about. Something else entirely. Are you going to let me talk? She asked. I'm here, he said. She wiped her face. Took a shaky breath. I didn't plan it, she said quickly. I need you to understand that. I didn't wake up one day and decide this. It wasn't like that. Edward stayed quiet. When you left, she continued, I kept telling myself it would be okay. I thought 4 years wasn't that long. I told myself this is what other women do. They wait. They hold things down. They survive it. And I tried, Edward. I really did. Her voice was steadier now. No drama. No acting. Just someone trying to say something she had held in for a long time. Maybe for the first time in 8 months, she was not filtering it. And it showed. Then the baby came. And everything got harder than I expected. And yes, you called every day. But every call felt like a checklist. How is the baby? How is the house? Did the contractor finish the roof? And after every call, I would lie there thinking he never asked how I am. Not really. Not in a way that felt like you actually wanted the answer. Edward felt that land somewhere deep in his chest. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He just let it sit there. Then she continued. Kelvin was here. He was here in a way you were not. He would sit with me, ask if I had eaten, ask if I slept. He would hold the baby when I couldn't even stand. And I know, her voice cracked again, I know that doesn't make it right. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to understand something. I wasn't chasing anything. I was just tired. So alone. And at some point, the line moved and I didn't stop it. And once it moved too far, I didn't know how to bring it back. Silence filled the room. When she finished, Edward stayed still, taking it all in, not reacting, not rushing, just processing it the way he always did when something mattered. Slowly, honestly, without trying to protect his feelings from the truth. He thought about every call, every how is everything, and for the first time, he really asked himself, did I ever ask her how she was? Not the house, not the money, not the child, her. He stayed quiet for a long moment, then finally spoke. I hear you, he said. Abigail looked up quickly. I hear what you're saying, Edward continued, and I'm not going to pretend I was a perfect husband from far away. I wasn't. I know that. He paused. But you need to hear me too. A small nod from her. Barely there. I didn't stay away because I stopped loving you, he said. I stayed away because I was building something for us. Every single day I was gone, I was working toward this house, this life. He gestured around the room. For you. For our child. Then his voice tightened just slightly. And while I was doing that, you let another man into it. Into my house. Into my space. Into my life. With my money. He stopped there. Still calm. Still controlled. But the weight of the words filled every corner of the room. Both things can be true, he added. You were lonely, and you still betrayed me. One doesn't erase the other. Abigail looked at him for a long time. Then something changed. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. She just nodded. Slowly. Fully. Like something inside her finally gave up trying to fight the truth. I know, she whispered. I know. Edward looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. The small velvet box. He placed it on the table between them. Right there. Next to the glasses. Next to the leftovers of a night that no longer felt like it belonged to anyone. He didn't open it. He didn't explain it. He just left it there. Then he stood up, picked up his bag, and walked down the hallway. Not out of the house. This was still his house. He built it. He paid for it. But not to that room. Not tonight. He chose the guest room. That night, Edward didn't sleep. He lay on his back, shoes off, jacket folded on the chair, staring at the ceiling. Fresh paint. Clean finish. Still faintly smelling new. That detail stayed with him longer than it should have. Someone had painted this room while he was gone. Someone had made decisions in his absence. Small things, but they stacked up and became something bigger. Outside, the night kept moving. Distant cars, dogs barking, a generator cutting off somewhere in the distance, dropping the world into sudden silence. And in that silence, his mind didn't rest. He went back to the first year abroad. Cold nights, empty room, cheap food, calls that felt like hope. He had believed every sacrifice had a clear end point. He had believed he was building something solid. Then he thought about the money, not just as numbers, but as time, hours, days, years of his life converted into transfers sent home piece by piece. And some of it had gone somewhere else. To Kelvin. To a life he didn't know existed while he was building his own version of reality. Then his thoughts shifted again. His son, James, 3 years old. A child he had only known through a screen. First steps through a video call. First word, mama, through a speaker that couldn't hold the moment properly. He had never been there in the real way. That thought hurt deeper than anything else. Not betrayal. Not Kelvin. Not even Abigail. James. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, Edward sat up. Feet on the floor. Hands resting on his knees. Breathing slow. Controlled. Then he stood. Walked quietly down the hallway. He stopped at a door with small wooden letters, James, painted blue. He remembered when Abigail sent him the photo. He had replied, "Looks great." 2 words. Because he was busy at work. Now it felt like something heavier than that. He pushed the door open gently. The room was dim. A soft nightlight shaped like a star glowed on the wall. And there he was, James. Small body turned slightly on his side. One hand under his cheek. Mouth slightly open. Breathing steady. Completely unaware of everything happening in the world around him. Edward stood still. He had imagined this moment for years. Walking in. Holding him. Hearing him wake up. He had pictured joy. A clean beginning. But reality didn't feel like that anymore. The future he had built in his head didn't fit this room. Not anymore. Something had already changed it. He stepped closer. Very carefully, he placed one hand on the child's back. Light touch. Barely there. James kept breathing. Edward stayed like that for a moment. I'm here, he thought. Whatever happens next, I'm here. By 6 o'clock in the morning, Edward was in the kitchen making tea. The sky outside was still pale. Early gray light. Quiet street. First birds starting to move. He had found his tea in the same cupboard it always was. That small detail hit him more than expected. Some things hadn't changed. Others had changed completely. Kettle on. Steam rising. Silence everywhere. Then he heard footsteps. Abigail entered slowly. Careful. Hesitant. Like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be in the same space as him anymore. She looked different from last night. No yellow dress. No sharp confidence. Just a long sleeping gown, messy hair, tired eyes. She looked like herself again. The version he remembered. He didn't say anything at first. Just poured 2 cups. Set one in front of her. Sat down opposite her. They both held their cups. Steam rising between them. I saw him, Edward said quietly. James. Abigail looked up. That was around 4 o'clock, he continued. I know, she said softly. I heard you. You should have been sleeping. So should you. A pause. Not angry. Just heavy. He glanced at the child and said quietly, he has your frown. A small change crossed Abigail's face, almost a smile, but not quite, like something that used to be there and isn't allowed anymore. Everyone says that, she replied softly. Even when he's happy, he still does it. He'll be smiling and frowning at the same time. My mother said the same thing about me, Edward said. I know, she answered. She told me once. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. It was that strange kind of silence between 2 people who know every detail of each other's past, but now sit on opposite sides of something that cannot be undone. Edward held his cup with both hands. I've been thinking, he said. Abigail immediately went still. I've been thinking all night, he continued, going over everything again and again, trying to see if there's a way to fix this, if time could heal it, if what we had before was strong enough to survive what happened. He paused, and I keep arriving at the same answer. Edward, please, she started. Abigail, he said firmly, I cannot stay in a marriage that was built on sacrifice and answered with betrayal. Not because I hate you, I don't, but because if I stay, I will never trust again. Not you, not myself, not anything in my life. And I refuse to live like that. I worked too hard. I gave too much. I will not spend my life looking over my shoulder in my own home. His voice never rose. No anger. No shaking. Just certainty. The kind that comes after a long night of thinking and deciding. Abigail's tears came quietly. No noise. No drama. Just pain showing itself. Please, she said. We have a child. We have a life. I know I broke something, but broken things can be fixed. People fix them every day. Just give me a chance to show you. Abigail, he interrupted gently. She stopped. I forgive you, he said. That hit her harder than anything else. Her eyes widened slightly, searching his face for meaning. I'm not going to carry hatred, he continued. I'm not going to walk away, bitter. That's not who I am. He leaned forward a little. But forgiveness is not the same as coming back. I can forgive you and still leave. Both are true. But we can try, she whispered. I've thought about that too, he said. And trying in this situation would just be pretending. And you don't deserve a fake husband. And neither does James. At the mention of their son, her eyes closed briefly. He will have me, Edward said. I want that clear. No matter what happens between us, I will be his father. I am not disappearing from his life. She nodded slowly. But us, he continued, that part is over. I think you know that. I think you've known since last night. Silence followed. Then Abigail finally nodded again, heavier this time. I know, she whispered. Outside, life kept moving. Cars passing. Gates opening. The world not stopping for anyone. The days that followed were not simple. There were lawyers, papers, phone calls that lasted too long. Moments where silence in a room felt heavier than shouting. Edward spent many hours alone in the guest room, his temporary space, and stared at the walls while the reality of everything pressed down on him. Sometimes he woke up and forgot for a second, then remembered, and had to feel it all over again. But he didn't run from it. That was always his nature. If something hurt, he faced it fully. No escape, no distraction, just truth. He let it sit with him until it became something he could carry. 3 weeks later, he called his mother. She listened without interrupting. That alone told him everything. When he finished, she asked softly, Are you broken? No, he said, and he meant it. Good, she replied. Then you know what to do. He did. He moved into a smaller apartment. 1 bedroom, a study, a quiet street outside. He built it slowly. Nothing rushed, just what he needed. A bed, a desk, a chair by the window. Then he went back to work. The company gave him a senior role in his home country. He accepted. Work didn't erase the pain, but it gave his life structure again. It reminded him he was still capable, still useful, still himself. He didn't hide in distractions. He built a routine instead. Every weekend he saw James. Saturday mornings he would arrive at the house. His house, though he had already signed it over so James would have stability. And every time, James would run straight into his arms like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. That was the part that broke and healed him at the same time. They went to parks, the zoo, ice cream shops where James would stand and take forever deciding, completely serious. And Edward would just wait. And that silence between them felt right. He didn't date, not for a long time. He wasn't running from loneliness. He was learning himself again. He read more. He exercised. He spoke to his mother every Sunday. He slowly built a new life that belonged only to him. A retired engineer lived downstairs. A student lived upstairs. Small conversations turned into regular ones. Human connections without pressure. And strangely, he wasn't unhappy. There were hard days, yes, but they didn't define him anymore. What defined him was simple. He had not lost himself. In October, on a rainy Tuesday, the divorce was finalized. Edward sat in the lawyer's office, signed his name, and ended it officially. That was it. No drama. No final explosion. Just a signature. Outside, rain fell hard. He stood under it for a moment, expecting something sharp to hit him. But what came instead was quiet. Relief. Not escape. Just clarity. He got into his car. Sat there for a moment. James was coming Saturday. Work meeting at 2 o'clock. His mother next week. Life was still moving forward. He started the engine. As he pulled into the rain, he thought briefly about the small velvet box he had left behind long ago. Maybe it was still there. Maybe it had been opened. He didn't know. And for the first time, he didn't need to. He drove forward. Not broken. Not bitter. Just steady. A man who had lost a life he once believed in and still managed to keep his dignity intact. And that in the end was enough.